I know y'all are like, "Bit, where's the vlog that you promised us from the amazing readathon?" In the trash. In the trash. Hey y'all, oh, welcome back to Bookish Realm. I'm Ashley, or welcome if you're new. This is the first time you're seeing the channel. I like this green, okay? I usually do like a lot of darker colors, but this kind of like greenish, minty-ish. Does it look like mint to y'all? It kind of low-key looks like mint to me with the ruffle like sleeves. Like I'm really low-key feeling that, and I'm also itching for new ink. But that's not in the budget right now, so I might as well go ahead and let that pipe dream go. Okay, so here we are. Y'all are like, yo, girl, where is the reading vlog from the amazing readathon? It's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. Which is totally fine. Like, I definitely did get a lot of footage, but I just made the decision just not to upload it. And that's just on me for a host of different reasons. But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of my reading experience in June, the best and worst books. I'm not going to go into details of everything I read because one, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not editing it. Like, I do not have the capacity, the time, the energy, the wherewithal to even begin to do any of that. I just don't want to do it. Like, I just honestly, like, keeping it $150 with y'all, I don't want to do that because I read over 130 something books for the amazing readathon. I didn't read additional books on top of that did not go towards the readathon because I had other priorities that I needed to take care of, which I'm playing catch up with some other stuff right now. And so, yeah, I didn't read that stuff. I mean, I didn't calculate that into the readathon. And so the final number, I think, for the number of books that I read in June was something like close to the 180s. That is absolutely ridiculous. I have never read that much in my lifetime in any given month, and I will never do that again. And so I think that one of the things for me is that, like, I definitely loved Izzy and Heather being my fearless leaders for the readathon. Absolutely amazing. Enjoy them, adore them. They know this. But this was my first and my last time doing the show. I can't do it. I can do it, but I can't do it in the sense that my mood reading really was interfering with everything in June. I wanted to read what I wanted to read and do what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do that when you're doing something that's prompt based. And there were a couple of points where I felt like I was reading for the sake of reading, which is not, I don't do that. So that was kind of a difficult adjustment for me as a reader. And I felt like it could have really done some damage to my reading, and I should have known that before going in. But it's a good lesson in learning that, hey, I am not a prompt-based girly. And so I probably will not, not even probably, I will not be doing that again next year. I am going to personally stick to Black Away and 30 and 30 because those are things that I think can work with my mind. But I kind of was very close to feeling severe burnout from what I did in June. And then also I think for me is that, like, because we don't really know exactly how things work on the back end in details, I wasn't sure when it was all said and done, like, how my reading contributed to the team. Like, we came in second place, which is great. I love it. Like, it was, Team Romance was amazing. I love my team, but I don't think that I had a firm grasp on what happens, like, point wise. And so there was a point, I think, when I was reading and I was like, I don't know what I'm reading for. Like, I don't know. I don't understand how the points work. So it just was kind of like, I was, once again, going back and saying, like, I feel like I was reading for the sake of reading. And unfortunately, that's, like, me, I can't function. My brain can't function like that. But I had a great experience with Team Romance, and my two fearless leaders, absolutely adored them. They made the experience enjoyable for me, but I am happy to say that I've done it once, and I'm happy to say that I have completely and totally topped my goals in measures that I could have never ever imagined. But it's just, that's not for me, y'all. It's not for me. So unfortunately, I scrapped that entire vlog, and I am not going to go into specific details about everything that I read. If you follow me on Goodreads, if you follow me on Instagram, you were seeing all of that stuff in real time. You can go through and kind of see how my reading kind of blew away in the month of June. And really, I mean, I had to change my Goodreads reading challenge, and I was not expecting to have it change like that soon. I knew at some point I probably was gonna have to up it again, but I definitely hit my reading challenge again this year, and so I had to up it again. And I'm probably going to have to up it at least maybe 2 more times this year, but I was not expecting having to do it that soon. So with that being said, we're going to do it the same traditional format that I typically do it. You'll be getting a weekly wrap up from me for this first week of July, hopefully on Sunday or Monday of the following week. And so we can get back into the swing of that stuff again. But I just wanted to highlight some of the best books that I read and some of the worst books I read. And another thing that I noticed is that I did not collectively enjoy everything that I was reading, because of the fact that I had to find things to fit into slots. And so I wasn't necessarily reading what I 100% wanted to read in the moment. And so it was actually more difficult for me this time. As much as I have read, it was more difficult for me to pick out a best list of books as opposed to a worst list, which usually it's usually difficult for me to choose a best list because I have so many, and I usually struggle with the worst. But it was like completely opposite this time. It was easy to find books I did not like. And it was difficult for me to pick books where I was like, yes, I'm raving and loving all of the books that I'm reading. So we're going to do what we always do. We're going to start with the worst and then end on a positive note. I will say that I haven't finished all of my reviews for the month of June, but I am pretty sure that I read close to, if not 30,000 pages in the month of June, which is unbelievable. I think I average usually anywhere in between 8,000 to 10,000 pages a month, and so to essentially triple the amount that I was reading in a month was absolutely mind-boggling to me. It still is mind-boggling to me. All right, let's start with the worst books first. And I genuinely feel like the hype of books that have been releasing in 2024 have burnt me to my fucking core, because I'm so confused as to why so many books that have been so damn hyped, they're not good. They're not good. And the first one that we're going to talk about is First Lie Wins. Now, this is Ashley's transition from going from YA to adult. I always constantly say that is not an easy transition to make. Not only are you switching 9 times out of 10 your genre, but you're switching age category, and that is not easy, especially if it is not an age category or a genre that you are used to writing. I say this all the time because I see a lot of young adult authors are now trying to transition to adult, and adult trying to switch to I've seen a lot of adult authors start doing picture books. Listen, being a writer doesn't mean that you are gifted in every freaking area. You know what I'm saying? Like, that does not mean you may be a hell of a writer when it comes to literary fiction or realistic fiction or romance or whatever. That does not automatically mean that you're going to be able to write a thriller or a horror. Like, that it's a lot of studying that genre and that specific craft. So there's that. First Lie Wins has gotten huge buzz because it is a Reese Witherspoon pick. It was one of the most anticipated releases for January of 2024, and I put off reading it for so long because of the fact that I had gotten a advanced listening copy from Libro. Usually when I get advanced listening copies from Libro, I ultimately end up putting these books off to the side because I know that I can get to them at any point. Those that I don't get as Libro ALCs, I make a priority because I know that I'm going to be waiting more times than not on whoever else is reading it through the library. That's just, I'm at the mercy of my own system that I work for with new releases. So First Lie Wins follows a main character whose name I couldn't even be so bothered to remember. That's how wild that is. And I'm not gonna even be so bothered to look it up because I'm like, what's the point? But she is kind of like this undercover type of person. She has a fake identity. She gets assignments from this guy named Mr. Smith, and she is working on her latest assignment at the time that we enter this novel, and she is supposed to be kind of attached to this guy. And we are finding out that she is feeling a little bit too at home with this man and is seeing that maybe that there's more to life than these secret undercover type of operations that she does for a man that she's never met before. She doesn't know his real identity. And then things start going left, where the identity that she had assumed, she meets another woman who literally has the same identity. So that means that they have both received kind of the same assignment, because it was her first clue to recognize that this woman probably is working for the same guy, because of the fact that they have kind of the same, I would say, identity card. Like the points of like their hometown, their life, and all this stuff, they hit the same things. And so it's her first clue to say like, hold up, this is the identity that I was assigned. How are you being assigned the same identity? It was kind of like that first clue as into like, something's wrong. This book had too much going on. It was too much, because I don't understand. I literally do. I don't understand why we had so many different pieces and parts to this book, and this book still did not make sense when it came to the end. This book pissed me off so much, and I think I was so generous by giving it 2 stars. I really do feel like I was generous by giving it 2 stars, because really, honestly, I think this book should have gotten 1. And I am the outlier here, because everybody seems to love this book, and I'm like, but why do y'all love this book? Because this book literally makes no sense. It is told in different timelines where we're seeing her in the present, and then we're getting flashbacks of her past identities. That is confusing. It's confusing because every time we flash back to when she's had an assignment given to her from Mr. Smith, she's using a different name and different characteristics, and it's a different situation. And I'm like, but why do we need to do this? And I get that part of it was because it showed her inability to really remove herself emotionally from a lot of situations, which is why she continuously gets caught up, and why Mr. Smith has such an issue with her, because she's so dependent upon her emotions. She lets them kind of seep through in a lot of situations in which they shouldn't seep through. But it was so horribly written to the point that I was like, I could not keep up with what was what. And when I tell you, I was not listening to this book at 2 times speed. I was listening to this book fairly slow because it was so confusing. And then to like I shouldn't talking about this. The ending probably is the most frustrating piece of this. It is the most frustrating piece of this. If your main character has to tell me everything that happens, they have to clarify and make sense of everything that happened in your novel, that means you know the book that you wrote was too confusing. There's no reason why your main character had to walk me through step by step, scenario by scenario, event by event, and tell me what exactly happened, clarify, to give a summary of everything so that this book would make sense at the end. It was predictable. It was poorly written. It was confused on what it wanted to be. This, I assumed, was a thriller, but when I read it, I was like, is this an espionage novel? Is this a mystery? Is this a thriller? Is this a love story? Like, what is it? And I'm not knocking anything or any book that does genre blending, because there are a lot of great books that do blend genres. But honey, This book was not it. And I think I am so blown away by how many people are like, oh, this book is great, 5 stars, 4 stars. I'm like, but where did we read the same book? And I get it, because there's books that I love that people give like 1, 2 stars and they're like, I have no idea what you saw in this book. I respect it. Everybody has their different book opinions, but I could not see this one for the Forced Retreat. Like, I literally could not understand any love or appreciation of this book. It was so lackluster. It was not engaging. It felt like a hogwash of just random events put into a situation, and then when we get to the reveal, it's like, well, it's clear that this is who Mr. Smith is. And I'm like, could we have gone with anything but Mr. Smith? And then the reasons for why he was doing music, I was like, this is so stupid. Why did I waste my time why did I waste my time reading this book? All right, I'm gonna get off of it because clearly I have strong feelings about this book. I just did not like it. It just was not for me. And that's as simple as 1, 2, 3. This book was not for me. Now, this next one is not one that I strongly dislike. This is not as rough as First I Wins, but for one of the prompts, I had ended up reading Never Trust a Gemini by Freya Nicole Wolf. Or it's Freja Nicole Wolf. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce their first name. And I'm telling y'all, this was not bad, okay? I mean, it could have been better, but it was one of those books where I just think it was super mid. I wasn't super engaged, but I wasn't like, I'm hating my reading experience during this book. It wasn't like that. It focuses on a main character by the name of Kat, who has this crush on another girl. It's a sapphic romance. She has had this crush on this girl, and it's messy, which is fine because it is a young adult book. So I don't want it to come off as if I'm saying like, oh, it's messy. And it's a lot of behavior I think that you would typically expect from a group of teenagers. And Kat is like, I don't want to say she's super obsessed, but she has a crush on this girl who clearly does not give a crap about her. And I think that was probably my point of contention with this one, where it was clear that Kat was very interested in this girl. She really cared about her. She put this girl before herself, and this girl could not be bothered. And at the time, it is a coming of age, coming out of sorts story for Kat, like coming to grips with her identity. But at the same time, it was, even if this girl did not realize that Kat was a lesbian, it still was poor friendship. Like, she was a very crappy friend who is very self-centered. And I think sometimes it's hard for me to read characters like that who definitely don't have any room for growth, development, or have any type of like redemption arc. So that was kind of frustrating. And Kat can be an unlikable character sometimes because there is a love interest that's really sweet, and I feel like there were a couple moments where Kat does her wrong, but she does grow a lot and she does learn. And I love the whole astrology kind of mixed in with it, and the relationship dynamics between her and her sister. I did enjoy that. I think that when I was reading this, it definitely had a Bridget Jones Diary feel to it, but make it queer. That's definitely how it felt for me when I was reading it. This is not one that I think I would be like, oh, you must read this book, or this is a book that I would like highly recommend, or I just feel like there's probably young adult books out there with astrology that are a little better. But if you're interested in astrology, you like something that's a little bit on the messy side, it just wasn't. There were some cringe-worthy moments in this too, in terms of like dialogue. And so it was okay. And this was once again one of those situations where I had this available to me on Libro FM. It fit one of the prompts, and I read it and I'm like, you know what? I definitely could have used this space to read a different book, but it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't the best. And so if we're talking about like most disappointing books that I read in June, I would have to put this on the list. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to include is, it's hard for me to put this on this list. And it wasn't a bad read. I'm going to say that right now. This genuinely was not a bad read. I was disappointed by this because it was a book that I was looking forward to. And I read it and I was shockingly disappointed by it because it's two authors that I've read separately that I've really enjoyed. And I'm shocked that I didn't like them together. It was very shocking that this did not work for me as a whole. So that is 4 Eids and a Funeral. And I know that there are quite a few people who have been looking forward to this one. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's breathtaking. So many pieces and parts of this could have worked, but I had some major issues with it. Okay, so I do want to say content warnings for this one that I definitely want to point out. The racism, Islamophobia, death of a child, and grief. The death of the child does not happen on page, but it is talked about because it does play a big role into one of the characters, and then how their relationship dynamic ends up kind of working out. So it focuses on 2 teens, Tiwa and Saeed, and they grew up together. They've been close friends for an extremely long time, and things end up kind of going left when Saeed leaves and he goes to school elsewhere. And they have a falling out of sorts, but the falling out of sorts is more of a communication thing. So they come back together because of the death of their favorite librarian, and the local Islamic center ends up catching on fire. And they end up having to work together because the mayor wants to just kind of do away with the Islamic center because he doesn't feel like it's needed in the community. So instead of providing appropriate funds for restoration purposes, he would rather just get rid of it and do other things with the property. And so the two of them have to work together to save the Islamic center. I always say when I'm going into books where the characters have an identity or faith or whatever that I don't have experience with, especially in this because it features 2 Muslim characters, and I am not a member of that faith. I don't like to speak to representation because I can't speak to the accuracy, and I know that both of our authors are Muslim, but at the same time too, I'm also aware of the fact that one person cannot speak for the experience of all. So the same way I would say, like, just because a Black author has written this perspective or this experience doesn't mean that it's indicative of the experiences of the entire Black community, because no one group, regardless of the identity that we share, is a monolith. So I won't speak to it, but I will say that I'm happy to see that publishing is pushing, especially in the religion area, more books that do not follow the typical Judeo-Christian faith. And I don't mean that as any disrespect, but I think that that is typically or has been the standard for a lot of time in publishing. And so it is nice to see other faiths represented, and especially Eid being the center and focus of this all. And I have, as my position in working in collection development and doing the selection of materials, I've been seeing more children's materials that celebrate Eid, and that's nice. And I think it's good for kids to see those different religious experiences because it helps build tolerance, and you're not just filled with the negativity that often comes from media. So there's that. But I was really happy to see that. There was some initial conversation about Tiwa's experience because she's Black and she's a practicing Muslim. And it's interesting because you get to see kind of even the racism that exists. It's that intersectionality, which I thought was great, because people think Muslim and they see only one type of person, right? The same way when people think Judaism, they only see one type of person, not realizing that there are people from all types of backgrounds, shapes, and colors that can be of a certain faith. So the fact that she was Black and Muslim, we get to see that kind of intersectionality at play, and how she faces 2 different types of discrimination. One, for being a practicing Muslim, and 2, for being Black. And even those experiences that she has within her own faith of being Black and Muslim it was great. Now, do I wish that they would have kind of delved a little bit more into that experience for Tiwa? Absolutely, because I feel like that would have been a great point of discussion for people to see about some microaggressive behaviors that you could experience even in a community where you share marginalization. And that is why it's important for us to recognize intersectionality and the role that it can play in an individual's life. But I feel like that wasn't explored enough. I feel like we got a little bit of that, especially when they started doing some kind of like canvassing around their community to help save the Islamic Center. We kind of see that at play a little bit, but I don't feel like it was expanded upon enough. Now, my biggest thing with this book is that we're getting flashbacks of Tiwa and Saeed in their different stages of life celebrating Eid, which I thought was a fascinating concept, but at the same time, it just felt like a series of events kind of strung together and didn't feel as cohesive as it should have. I got the overall intention because it's supposed to give you this perspective of where their relationship was and how it slowly disintegrated to get to the point of where they are now. But it didn't feel like they were written in a way that felt super strong to me as a reader. I also think that the biggest disappointment of all of this was the reveal of why they stopped communicating, because it had nothing to do with them and it was an outside force, and it just felt I don't want to say it felt like a cop-out, because I don't think that's fair of me to say that, but it felt so far away from the characters that once it was done, once that was figured out, it was like there was nothing for them to really work out. And so it kind of took away from the investment in their relationship and having to navigate what problems they would encounter as a couple. That wasn't really, there was no investment in that, because once that reveal came, it was like, okay, so this really literally had nothing to do with the two of them. And it was an outside conflict. And so they all of a sudden, they were fine. And it was like, okay, but we're not, I don't know. It felt like we built up to this moment to figure out what they needed to work through. And there was nothing for them to work through. And so that was a huge disappointment. And I feel like that threw off the pacing. It threw off my ability to be invested in them together. I was invested in them as individuals. I thought they were very interesting characters individually, but together it did not work. And I think that comes with collaborations, where we have two authors who are writing what seems like two characters, which the characters were strong on their own, because I think that both of these authors are very capable and wonderful and brilliant writers, but having to force them to come together to build a relationship between two people that they appeared to be writing individually, when they had to bring it together to work, it didn't work for me. So it's kind of sad, because I think that there were a lot of pieces and parts of this that worked, that I enjoyed. But if I'm being transparent and honest, I think as a whole, the novel did not work as well as I think it was intended to work. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I think that they are beautiful and meaningful and very powerful aspects of this. But if we're speaking for a novel that presents a cohesiveness that I typically look for in my novels, this was not it. And the last one that I have on this list is actually shocking, because for the most part, I have enjoyed everything by this author, except we know the third book in a trilogy. I was not a fan, but nobody was really a fan of that book. But I have read everything that she's done to date in terms of publication, and I always keep up with her new releases. This is her and Carrie McManus. I stay on them like white on rice because, honey, I don't know. There's authors like that where it's not like they're my favorite author, but for some reason I keep up with everything that release. Usually because I'm able to catch them early enough, and then I just end up reading everything. But I do know, like, for this person and Karen McManus, I stay on top of them. Every book that they release every year, I read. And that is Holly Jackson. I have read everything that she's published to date, and her latest publication, which is also receiving a lot of hype, is the reappearance of Rachel Price. This is my least favorite Holly Jackson to date. I was not a fan of this book. I did not dislike it, like hate it, but if I'm looking at her bibliography, this is her weakest. For me personally, this is her weakest to date, and I know that she's capable of doing more, in my opinion, based off of other things that I've seen by her. The reappearance of Rachel Price focuses on a main character whose mother has gone missing. And at the start of this, she's actually getting interviewed for a docu-series that's covering the missing, the missing case of her mother. And the way that her mother goes missing is actually the two of them were together. So she is inevitably the last person to have seen her mother alive. And she's too young to really remember what happens, but she has gone missing. No one knows what happened to her. There's no traces of her. There's nothing. Like, there's just nothing. And so she has had to move on with her life. She's hoping by doing this docuseries that everything will just stop. And she doesn't have to speak about it again, and it could finally be done and over with, and she can move forward and move on with her life. But the thing about it is that, you know, her mom pops back up. So that's probably what pulled me in when really diving into this book, is that we're trying to close out this case and her mother pops up. And naturally, her mother has been gone for such a long time, and her father has raised her by himself. And her mother pops back up, and her mother is telling her what exactly has happened, and she's able to pick up very quickly that there's some discrepancies in the story that she's telling. And things are not adding up, and so she's trying to figure out, like, what exactly happened to her mother. And why does it feel like her mother is lying about what happened and why she's back? I will say that Holly Jackson is usually really good about keeping things under wraps until the very last moment. In this book, I feel like she struggled greatly. There were reveals at the end, especially when we're talking about family dynamics. There's one in particular with the cousin. It was so clear from the get-go how things were interconnected. And it was a particular scene where the cousin was at the house with the mother, and the main character walks in, and I'm like, oh, ding, 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 ding. I know how all of this is going to unfold. And it's not what I typically expect of Holly Jackson. I expect her to kind of keep me on the edge of my seat until that final moment. And she didn't do that this time. Now, there were some, I think, pieces and parts that I was able to kind of not figure out. There were some details that I wasn't able to put together. But I think my expectation of her is so high, and that's what happens when you start to read someone so closely. You get a feel for their writing style, how they plot, their character development. They have a certain style to them that you either don't appreciate or you do appreciate. And that's one of the key aspects that I appreciate about Holly Jackson, is I find her to be a very gifted storyteller. So coming into this and really looking at the storytelling and the way that the book was structured, looking at the character interactions, following how everything unfolded, and then getting to those conclusions, I was like, I know that you do better storytelling than this. I've seen you do better storytelling than this. And by the time we got to the end and everything was revealed, there was part of me that was like, not like, what's the purpose? But then almost like, what is the purpose of this? Like, I don't know. It wasn't mind blowing. And I think diving into her books, I always expect to be kind of blown. There's always one or two characters that I absolutely cannot stand. But it was a very mid reading experience. It was very lackluster. It was very just like middle of the, like it wasn't engaging in a way that I expected it to be engaging, which was fairly disappointing to me. And I think that I'm getting to a point where I'm reading a lot of thrillers and mysteries, whether those are young adult or adult, and they're not engaging me in a way that I think I want them to engage me, and maybe I need to back off of them for a little while. But yeah, it wasn't bad, but I expect more from her as an author. And I think that, and I'm double checking right now, I'm pretty sure that this does take place in the same area, same world of Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but there's no, from my understanding, I don't feel like there's a like super duper connection between the two, except the fact that they take place in the same area, like that type of thing. But yeah, not my favorite by her. Okay, y'all, let's go into the favorites for June, and I only have 3, y'all. This is what I was saying. It was so hard for me to really pick out books that stood out to me, and to be honest with you, I say 3, but I feel like I'm stretching. There were 2. I'm gonna be honest with you. There were 2 that stood out to me. Now, that's not to say that I didn't read books that were like 3.5, 4 stars. I did. There were quite a few that I read that genuinely were great, in the sense that I appreciated them for what they were, but I like books that stand out, that are going to stick with me, that are going to be with me for an extended period of time. And if I'm being fair, there are 2 books, okay, that were exceptional reads. I had good reads, I had great reads, but when I look at my best books of the month, I'm looking for the exception. The ones that kind of break the mold, the ones that I can't stop thinking about, the ones that are like the creme de la creme. And I don't want to just stretch books out just to have more on this list. So I'm going to go with the 2 that I know in my heart were great books that I read in June. The first one being Homie by Danez Smith. This is a poetry collection. I am not a poetry reader. I do not actively seek out poetry. Not to say that I haven't read it or that I won't read it or where I'm not interested, but I don't go out and I'm like, oh, I want to pick up a poetry collection. That's just not me, and that's just the way that I am as a person. I can appreciate it. I can acknowledge its beauty. But Homie was one that I ended up reading because Deidre from Shade Tree Reads had put me onto this poetry collection years ago. I feel like Deidre put me onto this in 2020 or 2021. I feel like it was 2020 when she originally had brought the collection to my attention. And I had put it off, and she told me it was an amazing collection. It is an amazing collection of poetry. It is one that I would love to go and revisit, and one that I just, the words, just everything that was put into this poetry collection was, it was so much. It was so much about the Black experience, especially toxic masculinity as it appears in the Black community, to be queer and to be Black. Talks about HIV and the impact that it's had, especially on the Black gay community. And I was blown away about just how much of the Black experience was tied into such a short poetry collection that was so real and made me feel so Black and proud of it, and also acknowledge like the struggles that Danez faced growing up in the Black community. But I think also just like overall the good and the bad, the good, bad, and the ugly of the Black community. And I think the things that we still struggle with, but also the beauty that exists in the Black community, how innovative we are, the community aspect of it, but like the things that we have to move forward on. And I think that one of the things I always say is that the Black community has to recognize the role of the Black queer community in this, in our grouping here. And I don't think people understand how conservative the Black community can be in terms of queerness. I think that's something that we know, but I don't know if people on the outside of the Black community know that is a conservative piece of the Black community that I feel like is so detrimental to us. It made me want to cry at some points. It made me laugh at some points. There were like parts that I just kept going back to over and over because it was just so beautifully crafted. I literally cannot stop thinking about this book because it's so good. It was so good. It was such a standout read. And now I want to go back and actively read the other poetry collections, which is not me. That's not me. But to have picked this one up and have felt like, whew, this was so good. It was so well done. And the last one that I'm going to talk about, because like I said, I don't want to extend this for the sake of extending it, is Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. This was, I feel like this was a huge one probably last year, but I missed it. I didn't read a whole lot of romance last year, and to be quite honest with y'all, when I pick up a romance, 9 times out of 10 it probably is going to be a Black romance. And it's not to say that I don't read other romances, but most of my romances throughout the year that I read are Black romance. And so I missed the whole entire, like, when everybody was reading Role Playing. And thank you to Izzy and Heather for introducing this book to our group, because I would have never picked it up if it wasn't for them. This was not a book that was on my radar at all. It was so good. I think I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm realizing that I like romances that have older characters in them, because I am getting older and I feel like while I can appreciate the dynamics and expectations that I would have of like a younger age group, I also am growing to appreciate those people who have already have like their lives established, and they're getting out into the dating world, or you know, they're divorcing and they're finding love again, because in this book our hero and heroine are both dealing with leaving their partners. Our hero's partner is with his brother, which is really shitty, and then our heroine has been divorced and has pretty huge issues with her ex-husband, but they're both well established. They're older, and so the way that they move is like there's this sense of maturity about it that I love. And it's taken me a while to realize this. I love older characters in romances. I did not realize how much I appreciated that and love that, I think, until I read Role Playing. And then also I think I got a little bit of that from The Oath, where we are dealing with older, more mature characters who've lived a certain amount of life at this point. And that's not to say that you can't get maturity when you have romances with people who are in their 20s and their 30s, but I feel like once you've had certain experience and you live a certain amount of life, I feel like there's knowledge that comes with that. There's knowledge that comes with experience. There's knowledge that comes with living life. And I love that. They're both mature and grown as hell. Okay? Both of these characters are grown and mature, and the way that they connect, and the fact that they like game, they're gamers. And the way that their romance develops from like figuring out like who, like that they've played with each other and like played with each other in gaming. And that there is like this hesitancy because of their preconceived notions on like who they think they are based off of this gaming. I think it's great. And they each have their own storylines, which were completely fascinating. Like him having to really focus on helping take care of his mother, and trying to get his mother aware of the fact that she's getting older and she's dealing with health issues that she doesn't want to face. And then her having to deal kind of with like this empty nest, with her son being away and her husband kind of being like shit, and not playing an active role in her son's life and having to take on all of that responsibility, and her constantly worrying about her son, you know, not having a social life and her not wanting to really socialize, him not wanting, like, this is such a me vibe type of book in the sense that I'm getting older and it's like, it's not that I dislike people all the time, but when I was in my 20s, I loved going out, loved socializing, loved doing all the things. And like the older I get, I'm like, I can just stay at home. I can stay at home and I will be fine just being at home in my cocoon. Like, I don't need to be out with people. And that's something that I think I personally relate to a lot. And then one of my favorite aspects of this was the demi-rep. The demi-rep in this was so good. And I love that it was our hero figuring out or finding the words, because he knew how he felt. But there is something about having the language to define how you're feeling. It's something like having a term to say like, this is what I feel, this is who I am, and there are other people in the world who experience the same things as me. It feels less isolating to have like that. It really is. It feels great. And so to have her support him through, like, you know, knowing like, okay, this is how I feel, and he's describing being Demi, and she's like, yeah, you know, like there's a term for that, like there's a community for that, like there are people in this world who experience that outside of you. And I think it was just so affirming for him, and being Demi, and then and also just in his sexuality, and not just being Demi, like his experiences with both women and men, and the way that she went to bat for this man. I'm telling you, if my partner is not gonna ride for me like that, I don't want you. Because the way I don't even want to spoil it, but this girl was about to fly over across a table. She's gonna fly across the table behind this man. Like, what you're not gonna do is disrespect him in front of my face. And what you're not gonna do is minimize his experience and his identity because you don't understand it, because you're too ignorant to understand it. I said, girl, we are never too old to defend our partners here. We're never too old to defend our partners in the face of bigotry and ignorance. And that for me was like, it was beautifully done. It was so beautifully done. I love them together. I love their chemistry. I love the conversations they have. I just love their individual storylines. I love them when they got together. This was so good. It makes me want to read so many other things by Kathy Yardley, and I can't believe I missed this book last year, but it is one of my favorite romances of 2024. Like, hands down, it is one of my favorite romances of 2024. So there's that. But that is it, y'all. I mean, it's wild. That out of all the books I read in June, I only have 2 exceptional books to talk about, which means that quantity does not always mean quality, my friends. And I think that most of my success for the month, to be quite honest with you, was in the graphic novels and comics and manga. It really was. I think that's where I found a better portion of my success, was in that vicinity. And of course, I don't talk about that on this channel, but I will be talking about that on my Realm of Comics channel. But I think that's where I found my success in terms of like prose. I ain't find it over here, y'all. I'm so sorry, but y'all let me know in the comments below what were your favorite books and least favorite books for the month of June. And as always, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're looking for ways to follow me on social media or support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I will be back with another video soon. Bye.
Aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare. Just stare, 'cause the